Maria was a young woman who had once dreamed of a life filled with love, joy, and comfort. But dreams had a way of fading when reality was cruel, and her reality was very harsh. She lived in a tiny one-room apartment in the corner of a poor neighborhood, where the walls were cracked, and the sound of traffic and shouting neighbors never let her rest. She was raising her little boy Daniel alone. He was only 6 years old, and his smile was the only thing that kept her moving forward. Every time she looked into his bright brown eyes, she felt both pain and hope. Pain that she couldn't give him the life he deserved, and hope that maybe tomorrow would be better than today. Maria worked as a cleaner. She would wake up before the sun rose, slip into her old shoes, and take a crowded bus into the city where she cleaned offices, houses, and sometimes even restaurants. The pay was low, barely enough for rent and a few groceries. She was always tired, her back ached, and her hands were rough from scrubbing floors and washing dishes. But she never complained to Daniel. She always forced a smile when she returned home, telling him stories about what she had seen in the city, stories that made him laugh and forget the hunger in his belly. But on this night, things were different. They had run out of food. Maria had stretched every coin she had, but there was nothing left. Dinner was only a small piece of bread, which she gave entirely to Daniel. She sat quietly, watching him chew slowly as if he was trying to make the bread last longer than it could. After he ate, he lay down on their thin mattress and whispered, "Mom, don't worry, I'm not hungry." But Maria could see his little body curling up, his stomach aching. When his eyes closed and his breathing slowed, she put her hand on his forehead and cried silently. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "What kind of mother am I if I cannot even feed my own child?" Her heart felt heavy, as if a stone had settled inside her chest. She thought about all the jobs she had begged for and been turned away from. She thought about the landlords who had warned her not to fall behind on rent again. She thought about Daniel, who deserved milk, fruit, and warm meals, not an empty plate. The desperation grew stronger with every second, and the silence of the night made her thoughts even louder. Maria knew that tomorrow would not be better. Her employer had cut her hours, and she would not have work for the rest of the week. That meant no money, no food, and no way to take care of her child. She pressed her face into her pillow, trying to hold back sobs so Daniel wouldn't wake up. She hated herself for thinking it, but for the first time she wondered if she had reached the end of her strength. It was then that an idea came to her mind, one that made her stomach twist in shame. She had heard other women in her neighborhood whisper about how desperate mothers sometimes offered themselves to men for money. She had never considered it before, never even let the thought stay in her mind. But tonight, when her son was hungry and she had nothing left to give, the thought returned and stayed. She argued with herself, telling herself it was wrong, that she would never forgive herself. But then she thought of Daniel's little face, the way he forced a smile through his hunger. "I will do anything for him," she whispered. "Anything." Her hands shook as she sat by the window and looked out at the night. The city lights in the distance glowed faintly, as if mocking her dark, empty room. She thought of the wealthy men she had seen passing by in expensive cars when she cleaned offices in the city. To them, money was nothing but paper. To her, money meant food, medicine, and survival. If she could just swallow her pride once, maybe Daniel would never have to go to sleep hungry again. She sat there for a long time, torn between her shame and her love for her child. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke through the window, she made her choice. She would go to the rich part of town that evening, and she would offer herself. Her heart trembled at the thought, but she convinced herself that if she kept thinking of Daniel, she could do it. That day, Maria forced herself through her routine. She walked to the market to buy nothing, only to distract herself and pretend she still had a normal life. She sat with Daniel in the park, watching him laugh as he chased pigeons. Her heart broke even more because he didn't know how close they were to losing everything. He thought his mother could protect him from anything, and Maria knew she had to keep that belief alive. As the evening came, Maria washed her face and put on her cleanest dress. It wasn't new, but it was all she had. She tied her hair neatly, looked into the mirror, and told herself, "This is for him. This is not for me." She kissed Daniel on the forehead as he slept, leaving him in the care of her elderly neighbor who often watched him when Maria worked late. Then, with her hands trembling and her heart racing, she walked toward the bright streets of the wealthy district. The city looked different here. The buildings were tall and shining, and the sidewalks were lined with luxury cars. Restaurants glowed with warm lights, and people dressed in fine clothes laughed as they stepped out of limousines. Maria felt small, like a shadow walking among giants. Her eyes darted nervously as she stood near a restaurant where businessmen gathered. She wanted to run back home, but then she thought of Daniel's empty plate. She forced herself to stay. She stood there for a long time, rehearsing the words she would say. Her throat was dry and she felt her legs shaking. How could she approach a stranger with such a shameful offer? What if they laughed at her? What if they called the police? Still, she whispered to herself, for him, for Daniel, and took a deep breath. That was the moment her life began to change, though she didn't know it yet. The decision she made out of desperation would lead her not into shame, but into the hands of someone who would see her differently than she saw herself. But for now, Maria only knew fear, hunger, and hope mixed together in a way that made her heart pound as she prepared to speak to a wealthy man who could change her son's life. Maria stood near the tall glass windows of the restaurant, her heart beating so loudly that she thought the people passing by might hear it. She had never been in such a place before. The glow from the chandeliers inside, the soft sound of violins playing, and the fragrance of expensive perfumes filled the air. Men in dark suits and women in elegant dresses moved about confidently, as if they belonged to a world completely different from hers. Maria felt like she was on another planet. Her dress was simple, her shoes worn, and her hands carried the marks of hard labor. But tonight she was not thinking about herself. She was thinking about Daniel. She stood frozen, whispering words of courage under her breath. Just one step. Just one word. Do it for him. Every time she imagined her son's hungry face, her courage grew a little stronger. She didn't need much. Just enough money to buy food for a week, maybe a bag of rice, some bread, and milk. That was all she wanted. As she waited, a tall man in a dark suit stepped out of the restaurant. He was not like the others she had seen. His presence was calm but strong, his posture upright, and his expression thoughtful rather than careless. His hair was dark, his shoulders broad, and there was something about the way people looked at him with respect that told Maria he was someone important. She swallowed hard. Her eyes followed him as he stood near a sleek black car, speaking quietly to his driver. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. She found herself walking toward him, her heart thudding faster with each step. She wanted to turn back, but she couldn't. She had promised herself that tonight she would not return home empty-handed. When she finally reached him, her voice almost failed her. "Sir?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on the ground. The man turned, his gaze falling on her. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. He looked at her as if trying to understand why a stranger had approached him in this place. Maria's hands trembled as she wrung her fingers together. I need help," she stammered. Her voice cracked and her throat felt dry. "My son, he is hungry. I have nothing left." She forced the words out quickly before fear silenced her. I will give myself, if you can give me enough money to feed him." As soon as the words left her lips, shame washed over her. Her face burned and tears pricked at her eyes. She couldn't believe she had actually said it aloud. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. The man stared at her silently. For a long moment, Maria feared he would laugh or call for security. But instead, his expression softened slightly. He studied her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the worn fabric of her dress, and the trembling of her hands. He could see she was not lying. "What is your name?" he asked calmly, his voice deep and steady. "Maria," she whispered. "And your son?" "Daniel," she said, her lips quivering. The man nodded slowly. Then, to Maria's shock, he opened his wallet and handed her several bills. "Take this," he said. "Buy food for him tonight." Maria's eyes widened. She reached out with trembling fingers, hardly believing what was happening. She clutched the money to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you, sir," but the man was not done. "Go home now," he said firmly. "Make sure your son eats. Tomorrow come here again. I will be waiting." Maria blinked in confusion. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," the man said, his eyes steady on hers. "We will talk then." He turned and stepped into his car, leaving her stunned on the sidewalk. Maria stood there for a moment, unsure if she had imagined the entire exchange. She looked down at the money in her hand, real and solid. Her chest tightened with relief. For the first time in many nights, Daniel would not go to sleep hungry. She hurried back to her neighborhood, her steps fast, her heart racing with gratitude. She stopped at a small grocery shop where she bought rice, milk, bread, and a little chicken. She even bought a small piece of candy for Daniel. Carrying the bags home, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. When she entered her apartment, Daniel's eyes lit up. "Mom, you got food?" he exclaimed, running to her. "Yes, baby," Maria whispered, pulling him into her arms. "Tonight we eat." They sat together at the small table, and Maria cooked quickly, her hands moving faster than ever. The smell of warm food filled the air, and Daniel clapped his hands happily. Watching him eat with joy made Maria cry silently again, but this time the tears were of relief. For a few precious hours, she felt like a mother again, able to protect and care for her child. But when the night grew quiet, her thoughts returned to the man she had spoken to. Why had he helped her? Why had he asked her to come back? She didn't know his name, but his image was clear in her mind. His calm face, his sharp eyes, his commanding presence. She felt nervous and uncertain, yet something about him gave her a strange sense of safety. The next morning, Maria woke early. She dressed Daniel for school with a new brightness in her eyes. She gave him bread with milk for breakfast, something he hadn't had in weeks. As he left for school, smiling and waving, Maria promised herself she would not waste the chance that had been given to her. All day, her mind was restless. She replayed the moment she had spoken to the man, the shame of her words and the unexpected kindness of his response. She wondered if he would still be waiting. She wondered if he would demand something in return. Fear and hope wrestled in her heart. When evening arrived again, Maria stood once more in front of the glowing restaurant. Her legs shook, but she steadied herself. She thought of Daniel's full stomach, of his smile, and she knew she had to keep moving forward. And there he was, the same man, standing tall near the entrance, as if he had truly been waiting for her. This time, when his eyes met hers, Maria felt her heart skip a beat. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. The next evening, Maria stood nervously outside the restaurant again. Her hands clutched the hem of her dress, her mind filled with questions she couldn't answer. Why had the man asked her to come back? Would he demand something from her now? Would he humiliate her for daring to approach him last night? Every thought made her want to run home, but the memory of her son eating happily pushed her forward. She could not waste this chance. The tall man appeared again, dressed in a fine suit, his expression calm but unreadable. When he saw Maria waiting, he gave a small nod as if he had truly expected her. He gestured for her to follow him, and she walked behind him nervously, her heart beating hard in her chest. They entered the restaurant, and Maria's breath caught at the sight of the shining chandeliers, polished tables, and people dressed in elegant clothes. She had never set foot in such a place before. The man led her to a private corner table and pulled out a chair for her. Maria hesitated, afraid to sit on a seat that looked too fine for someone like her, but his steady gaze encouraged her. Slowly she sat down. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Maria kept her eyes on the tablecloth, feeling out of place and small. Finally, the man spoke. "Maria," he said, his voice deep but not harsh, "tell me about yourself." Maria looked up in surprise. She had expected demands, not questions. She hesitated, then whispered, "There is nothing to tell, sir. I am only a cleaner. I live with my son. His father is gone. I do whatever work I can to keep him alive." The man studied her carefully. "And yesterday when you came to me, what did you think I would do?" Maria's cheeks burned. She lowered her gaze. I thought you would take what I offered. I thought you would laugh at me or call me shameless. I was ready to endure anything if only I could buy food for my child." Instead of anger or mockery, the man's eyes softened. He leaned forward slightly. "I did not help you because I wanted to take advantage of you, Maria. I helped you because I could see the truth in your eyes. You are a mother who loves her child more than anything. That is not something to laugh at, it is something to respect." Maria blinked at him, her heart twisting with confusion. Respect? She had not felt respected in years. She had been ignored, looked down upon, and treated as invisible. To hear this wealthy man speak such words left her speechless. The waiter arrived with food, plates of warm bread, roasted meat, and fresh vegetables. The smell made Maria's stomach turn with hunger, but she hesitated, not knowing if she was allowed to touch anything. The man gave her a small nod. "Eat," he said. She picked up a piece of bread slowly, as if afraid it would disappear if she touched it. When she tasted it, tears welled up in her eyes. It had been so long since she had eaten food like this. She covered her mouth, embarrassed by her own emotions. But the man only watched quietly, not judging her. As she ate, he continued to ask her questions. How old is Daniel? What does he like? Does he go to school? Maria answered each question softly. She told him Daniel was 6, that he loved drawing and playing with paper boats, and that she tried to send him to school, but often could not afford the supplies. She admitted her greatest fear, that one day she would fail him completely. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on her. Finally, he said, Maria, I want to help you. Not for one night, but for longer. Not in the way you feared, but in the way you truly need. Her fork froze in her hand. Help me? She whispered. Yes, he said simply. I do not want your body, Maria. I want to see your strength. I want to see you stand tall for your son. I can give you work, a chance to earn with dignity, but you must trust me. Maria's heart pounded. It sounded too good to be true. Why would a man like him, with money, power, and everything he could ever want, care about a poor woman like her? She stared at him, trying to read his face. There was no mockery, no false smile, only calm sincerity. Why? She asked finally, her voice trembling. The man leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. Because I know what it means to have nothing. People see me now and think I have always been wealthy, but they do not know where I came from. I was not born into this. Someone once gave me a chance when I had nothing. I have never forgotten that. Perhaps helping you is my way of repaying that kindness. Maria felt her throat tighten. His words pierced through her doubts, but part of her still feared disappointment. She lowered her eyes again. I do not deserve your kindness, she whispered. You deserve more than you believe, he replied firmly. You are stronger than most people I know. You are a mother who would sacrifice everything for her child. That is something few would do. His words washed over her like warmth in winter. For the first time in years, Maria felt seen, not as a poor woman, not as a failure, but as someone with worth. That evening, when she left the restaurant, she carried not only food for her son, but also a new spark of hope inside her. She returned home to Daniel with fresh fruit, bread, and milk. His laughter as he ate filled the small room like sunlight, but as she watched him, Maria's thoughts turned again to the man. He had not asked for what she feared. He had not humiliated her. Instead, he had given her dignity. She still did not know his name, yet he was already changing her life. The next days followed a similar pattern. Each evening, Maria met him again. Each time he asked her more about herself, about Daniel, about her dreams. He never spoke down to her. He listened as if her words mattered. Slowly, Maria began to feel less like a beggar and more like a human being again. Still, doubt lingered in her heart. What if his kindness ended suddenly? What if it was only temporary? She told herself not to trust too much, but deep inside she wanted to believe. She wanted to believe that someone could truly see her value even when she could not. She didn't know it yet, but these small moments of kindness were only the beginning. Her life was being woven into his in ways she could not yet understand. What had started with desperation was slowly turning into something unexpected, something that looked and felt very much like hope. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new world for Maria. Each morning still began with the familiar routine, waking Daniel, preparing him for school, and walking through the noisy streets of her poor neighborhood. But now her evenings held something different. Every night she returned to meet the man who had first looked at her with compassion instead of scorn. By now, she had learned his name, Alexander. It suited him, strong and refined, just like his presence. At first she had been afraid to even say his name, whispering it quietly when alone, almost as if it would disappear if spoken too loudly. But with each meeting, her fear lessened and respect grew. One evening, after a meal together, Alexander surprised her. Maria, he said, his voice calm but firm, I have something to ask of you. I do not want to see you beg or struggle anymore. I want to offer you honest work. Her eyes widened. Work? Yes, he nodded. I own many businesses, but I also have a large house. I need people I can trust. If you are willing, you can come work there. It will be honest pay, and you will be able to care for your son without fear. Maria's breath caught. The thought of entering his house frightened her. Would she fit into such a grand place? Would people laugh at her for being poor? Yet the offer was tempting. Honest pay meant she would no longer have to lower herself, no longer have to whisper desperate words in the streets. It meant food on the table, school supplies for Daniel, and dignity she thought she had lost forever. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling. "I will do it." "Thank you, sir." That week, Maria stepped into Alexander's mansion for the first time. The building was vast and beautiful, with marble floors, wide windows, and walls decorated with paintings she could never have imagined owning. She felt small, but Alexander's reassuring look reminded her she belonged here now, not as a beggar, but as a worker. Her tasks were simple: cleaning rooms, organizing shelves, and helping in the kitchen. It was work she already knew, but here it was different. For the first time, she was paid fairly and treated with respect. The other workers looked at her kindly, guided her through her duties, and never mocked her for her worn clothes or rough hands. Slowly, Maria began to stand taller, her voice steadier, her smile more natural. Each evening when she returned home, Daniel noticed the change. "Mom, you're happier now," he said one night as they sat together eating fresh fruit she had bought with her wages. Maria touched his cheek, her eyes glistening. "Yes, my love. Things are getting better for us." But it wasn't just the money that changed her life. It was Alexander's quiet presence. Though he never hovered, he often stopped to speak with her. He would ask about Daniel's school, about how she was adjusting to the work, about whether she was tired. His questions were never empty. He listened to her answers as if they mattered. One evening, after Maria finished tidying the study, she found Alexander standing by the window, looking out at the garden. He turned as she entered, his eyes thoughtful. "Maria," he said softly, "you have strength I rarely see. Many people in your place would have given up. But you fight every day for your son. Do you know how rare that is?" Maria shook her head, her cheeks warming. "I do not feel strong, sir. Most days I feel weak." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Strength is not about never feeling weak. It is about standing up even when you are broken inside. That is what you do, Maria." Her heart fluttered, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. His words filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She lowered her eyes, but inside a spark of pride glowed. As the weeks passed, Maria's confidence grew. She bought Daniel new shoes, his first proper notebook for school, and even a small toy car that made him squeal with joy. The neighbors noticed too. "Maria, you look different these days," the elderly woman next door remarked. "You smile more." Maria only nodded, holding her secret close. She didn't tell them about Alexander's kindness. She was afraid they would not understand. To them, wealthy men and poor women lived in different worlds. But for Maria, those worlds were slowly crossing. Yet with this new happiness, Maria also felt confusion. She began to notice the way her heart raced when Alexander entered the room, the way her cheeks grew warm when he praised her, the way she looked forward to his voice at the end of each day. She scolded herself silently. "He is a wealthy man. He is only helping you because he is kind. Do not dream of anything more." But her heart did not listen to her warnings. One night, as she was leaving the mansion, Alexander walked her to the gate. The evening was quiet, the garden lights glowing softly. Maria held her shawl tightly around her shoulders, nervous in the silence. "Maria," Alexander said, stopping her before she left. She turned, her eyes meeting his. "You are doing well here," he said. "Not just in the work. You are changing. I can see it." Her lips trembled into a small smile. "It is because of you, sir. You gave me a chance when I had nothing." Alexander's gaze deepened. "Perhaps, but it is you who is taking that chance and making it into something. Do not forget that." Maria lowered her head, her heart pounding so loudly she thought he might hear it. She whispered softly, "Thank you." As she walked home that night, her thoughts were tangled. She could not deny it anymore. She was beginning to care for him in a way she had not allowed herself to care for anyone since Daniel's father left. It frightened her, but it also gave her hope she did not dare to name. Back in her small room, Daniel slept peacefully, his new shoes by his bed, his toy car clutched in his hand. Maria sat quietly, staring out the window at the stars. She thought of Alexander, of his steady eyes and kind words. She thought of the way he had given her dignity when she had none. Her life was no longer the same. She was no longer just a poor woman begging in the streets. She was working, standing, and dreaming again. And, deep in her heart, a question grew louder with each passing day. Could it be possible that this man, so far above her world, was beginning to feel the same way about her. She didn't know the answer yet, but she knew one thing: her heart was no longer empty. One cold evening, Maria returned home after finishing her work at the mansion. The streets were quiet and the air smelled of rain. She walked faster, eager to see Daniel, but when she entered the small apartment, she immediately noticed something was wrong. Daniel lay curled up on the bed, his face pale, his body trembling with fever. "Daniel," Maria cried, rushing to his side. She touched his forehead and gasped. It was burning hot. His breathing was uneven, his little lips dry. Fear gripped her heart. She had dealt with small fevers before, but this was different. This was stronger, dangerous. She tried to calm him, giving him water, pressing a cool cloth against his skin, but his condition did not improve. Tears streamed down her face. "Please, my baby, stay with me. Don't leave me." Her hands shook as she thought about what to do. She had no money for a doctor, no way to afford medicine from the expensive clinic nearby. In desperation, she remembered Alexander. Without thinking twice, she wrapped Daniel in a blanket and ran into the night. She flagged down a taxi with trembling hands, whispering to the driver, "Please, take me to the big house on Rosewood Lane." When they arrived, Maria rushed to the gates of the mansion, her voice breaking as she begged the guards, "Please, please call him. My son, he is very sick. I need help." Moments later, Alexander appeared, his face instantly filled with concern. He didn't hesitate. He picked up Daniel in his strong arms and shouted to his driver, "To the hospital now." Maria followed, her tears unstoppable as they sped through the streets. Inside the hospital, doctors rushed Daniel into an emergency room. Maria clung to Alexander's arm, her body shaking. "What if I lose him?" "He is all I have." Alexander placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You will not lose him. I promise you. He will be cared for." Hours passed like years. Maria sat in the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. Alexander remained beside her, silent but strong, as if his very presence kept her from collapsing. Finally, a doctor emerged and said, "He will be fine. The fever was high, but we have treated it. He just needs rest and proper care." Maria broke down, sobbing in relief. She covered her face with her hands, whispering, "Thank God. Thank God." When she looked up, Alexander was watching her. His eyes held something deeper than kindness, something that made her heart tremble. The next day, Daniel rested in a clean hospital bed, his color returning. Maria sat beside him, holding his hand, while Alexander stood quietly at the foot of the bed. When Daniel opened his eyes and saw him, he whispered weakly, "Thank you, sir." Alexander bent down slightly, his expression soft. "Rest, young man. You are strong, just like your mother." Later, when Daniel slept, Maria stepped into the hallway with Alexander. She turned to him, her voice filled with emotion. "I do not know how to thank you. You saved my son. I came to you once in shame, ready to give myself away just to feed him. And instead, you gave us life, dignity, and hope. Why, Alexander? Why would you do this for me?" For a moment, he was silent. Then he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Maria, from the very first night I saw you, I knew you were different. You came to me broken, but your eyes told me a truth stronger than any words. You are a woman who would sacrifice everything for her child. That is rare. That is beautiful. And as I watched you grow stronger, as I saw you smile again, I realized something I cannot hide any longer." Her breath caught. "What is it?" Alexander's gaze held hers firmly. "I never wanted to buy you, Maria. I wanted to love you. I wanted to give you the life you deserve, not because of pity, but because I see your worth." "I see you." Maria's eyes filled with tears. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole hallway could hear it. "Love me?" she whispered. "But I am nothing compared to your world. I am poor. I am simple." Alexander shook his head gently. "You are not nothing. You are everything. Money and power mean nothing if there is no one to share them with. And I want to share my life with you, Maria." Her hands trembled. She wanted to believe his words, but fear held her back. "Are you certain?" "A man like you could have anyone." "I don't want anyone," Alexander said firmly. "I want the woman who taught me what true strength looks like. I want the mother who fought for her son when the world turned its back. I want you." Maria could no longer hold back her tears. She covered her face with her hands, overcome by emotions she had buried for years. Slowly, Alexander reached out and lowered her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "Maria," he said softly, Let me be the man who stands beside you. Let me care for Daniel as my own. Not because I pity you, but because I love you." Her lips trembled as she whispered, I don't know if I deserve this." "You deserve more than this," Alexander replied. "You deserve happiness." At that moment, Maria felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. The fear that had weighed her down for so long seemed to lift. She thought of Daniel, of the new life she could give him, of the love she had secretly longed for but never believed she would find. Slowly she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Alexander." A smile, warm and genuine, spread across his face. For the first time, Maria realized how much joy there was in his eyes. It was not the smile of a wealthy man looking down at a poor woman. It was the smile of a man who had found something priceless. From that day forward, Maria's life truly changed. She moved into Alexander's home with Daniel, not as a servant but as someone cherished. Daniel thrived in his new school, running to Alexander with excitement to show him drawings and stories. Maria no longer walked with her head down. She walked with dignity, her heart full of gratitude and love. But most of all, she realized something important. What had begun as an act of desperation had turned into a journey of hope, dignity, and unexpected love. She had once offered herself to survive, but instead, she had found someone who wanted her not out of need, but out of choice. One evening, as the three of them walked together through the garden, Maria, Daniel, and Alexander, Maria looked up at the stars. Her son's laughter filled the air, and Alexander's hand held hers firmly. For the first time, she truly believed that life could be kind again, and deep in her heart, she whispered a silent prayer of thanks for the man who had seen her worth, for the love that had grown from pain, and for the second chance that had turned her broken world into a new beginning.